I'm Ben Collins, I'm Cancer Transformation Manager here at Buckinghamshire Healthcare Trust.
And I'm Clare Daniel, Chief Psychologist at Buckinghamshire Healthcare Trust.
And Clare and I co-chair what we think is the only staff mental health network at any acute trust in England. The objective of the network is to de-stigmatise mental health issues, to help try and influence strategy and policy and decision making amongst senior leadership to keep mental health and physical health issues on equal footing, and to promote mental health campaigns. And in fact, last week we had our Time to Talk campaign where we went out to some of the hospitals and met with a lot of the staff to try and promote the idea of how to have healthy, helpful, constructive conversations with colleagues that may be struggling. And as part of that, we gave this talk to the senior leadership briefing on Thursday, and we would like to share what we said with the wider trust. So we're redoing it now. So one of our objectives is to improve the culture of the trust and how we can feel more free to talk about things that might be bothering us or whether we're struggling or not. And we think that starts with micro culture. So if you're watching this and you're a member of the staff, you're a member of the trust and you're part of the culture. So how you interact with people that are close to you, your friends, your colleagues, your peers, that's what we mean when we talk about microculture. And if you're being kind and supportive in those conversations, that's going to spread throughout the trust and shift the wider culture.
And I think we live in a culture, more generally outside of the trust, we live in a culture where maybe some people don't understand what it's like to have a mental health problem, maybe some people don't want to understand, and this results in difficulties in conversations when somebody's struggling. So the person that's not struggling might say, but look, everything's fine, you've got lots going for you, and they're trying to be positive. Or they might avoid talking to someone. Or they might view someone with a mental health problem as being weak. And that's really difficult, just living in that culture in general. But then when we then have to come to work, we've got work to contend with as well, and of course that makes it particularly difficult. There's been some research to suggest that 9 out of 10 doctors who have mental health problems say they face stigma at work and discrimination because of their mental health problems. 9% have been victims of abuse at work as a direct result of having a mental health problem. 71% of people are worried about telling their employer about their mental health condition because they fear a negative response. And 40% believe that if they reveal that they have a mental health problem at work, then it will jeopardise their job prospects. So they're quite astounding statistics. I think it's really useful, as Ben said, that if you're someone that suffers from mental health problems, we start to feel confident about having that conversation about them at work. And if you're working with someone like that or managing someone, really important that again you feel confident and able to have a conversation with that person.
Yeah, so a few little thought experiments we've put together here. So the first one is, do you know anyone or has anybody experienced a physical health condition at any point in their lives? So an injury or an illness of any sort. And I would imagine that's pretty much unanimous that everybody's had a cold or flu or something at some point. The next question is, do you know anyone who's had a mental health issue? And although we know that a quarter of people have, the answer to that question, the number that we get would probably be a lot smaller. So the question is, why is that? Probably because people tend to stay silent about it, and probably because people tend to think that no one can help them. Talking about it isn't going to help. There might be some stigma attached with it, they might be scared to talk about it, or it might be all of those things. So the next question is, I'm going to ask this to Clare. Would you have any hesitation employing somebody who'd had 6 months off for mental health?
I think this is a difficult one. I mean, of course, given the Disability Discrimination Act, we absolutely should not hesitate employing anybody with either a physical health problem or a mental health problem. The hesitation you can hear in my voice is because I understand that it's really difficult to work in a difficult, busy, stressful environment when you have a mental health problem. So my hesitation is about thinking about the culture, and of course I would employ somebody, but I would have to ensure that the culture around that person, and also myself as a manager, would have to support that person and Nick myself as a manager. I think it's just really essential that that happens. And I think it's more difficult with mental health problems. If you have a physical health problem, it can, and not all the time, but it can be much easier to describe how that problem impacts on you and what adaptations you might need to be able to do your job. And maybe people feel a bit more confident about talking about it at work. When you have a mental health problem, it's much more difficult to talk about how it makes you feel. And it's also difficult and quite embarrassing sometimes to say what you might need to be able to do your job well and look after yourself in that environment.
So if somebody was coming to you for employment who'd had 6 months off for a physical health condition, broken leg or an illness of some sort, you'd feel confident that the culture of the trust was there to support you as their manager and them as an employee to do their job properly. Well, that's not necessarily so obviously the case for mental health issues. So Claire, to try and help people understand what it feels like to have to struggle with your mental health, Claire's written a blog and she's going to read that now. So I'll just hand over to you, Claire.
Thank you. So just so you know where this came out from, Ben and I were talking a few weeks ago, and I just went home and just wrote this. Don't know why I wrote it, but I just wrote it because I thought it might be useful to use as part of our in the network. So I'll just start reading it. Depression and anxiety have come in and out of my life for many years. For me, they co-occur, as they do for many people.
I've given up trying to explain how depression feels and how anxiety feels because I experience them as one thing, one overwhelming thing that stifles me, makes me feel ashamed, makes me believe that people are judging me. Sometimes I know the trigger, sometimes I don't. However, every time it happens, it creeps up on me over a few days and then suddenly I become aware of it. It's one of the worst experiences I have, and it's one that oppresses me. I constantly compare myself with others, feel stupid, incompetent, stuck, and ineffective. It locks me in an opaque bubble, making me feel distance from everyone around me, and sound is strangely muffled.
I look out at them talking and laughing with no way to connect. It makes me smile when people say that I can come across as calm and confident. Yes, that's how I feel when I'm not depressed, but when I am, these are the last things I feel. I don't feel calm, I feel overwhelmed and paralysed with anxiety. And I don't feel confident, I lose my self-belief. When I'm anxious, I hear that critical voice at the back of my head telling me I'm not good enough, telling me that people will think I'm stupid if I speak out loud, and shaming me when I forget my words or lack eloquence. Never ever underestimate how awful depression is. It's horrendous and its effects are enormous. Never think that it's similar to feeling sad or fed up, because I don't think there are any similarities. I can honestly say that depression and anxiety are the things that have had the worst effect on my life. Many people are great when they find out that there are times when I feel like this. But others are like vultures, ready to swoop and attack when I'm vulnerable. Vulnerability is a brave thing, but when it's in the presence of cruel people, it's another horrible experience. Thankfully, these people are in the minority, and I know that some people are like this because of their own psychological difficulties, and I try to remain mindful of this. Others just seem cruel because they haven't experienced anxiety or depression and are fearful of talking or thinking about it. Maybe they just don't know what to say. When I'm anxious and depressed, I don't want to hide behind a smile, pretending. I want someone to say kindly, "You don't seem yourself, how are you doing?" And when I reply with the inevitable, "Oh, I'm okay," and change the conversation, I want them to change it back and say, "You don't seem okay, fancy a chat and coffee." Forget hierarchies and power. When it comes to depression and anxiety, those things don't come into play. If anyone, no matter how junior or senior they are in the organisation, said these things to me, I'd be so grateful. Please don't allow your fear of "I don't know what to say" or "I can't help" stop you from talking to me. A kind face and a listening ear is what I need. I don't expect you to cure me. I don't expect you to spend hours with me. I don't expect you to solve my problems. What I need is kindness.
I sometimes think that if I could change anything, it would be to live a life without depression. And then I reflect on how this experience enables me to be more empathic with patients and colleagues, and I'm grateful for that. I'm not deficient, damaged, or less than. I experience depression just like many others. I have made the best relationships at work with colleagues who are kind, authentic, and who can be vulnerable. I value these relationships. These are the people with whom I go on to do good work. So you see there are far-reaching benefits to kindness. Colleagues feel supported and they do good work, which surely benefits our patients.
If you only take one thing away with you after listening to this, I'd like it to be this. I'm going to reread a section and substitute the I with colleagues and me with them. And I'd like us all to remember and act on those words.
A kind face and a listening ear is what colleagues need. Colleagues don't expect you to cure them. Colleagues don't expect you to spend hours with them. Colleagues don't expect you to solve their problems. What they need is kindness.
Thank you. And I've also experienced depression. I think anyone that has would identify very strongly with some of those things you've said there. How did it feel to read that out, knowing this is going to go out to many of your colleagues here at Brooks?
A mixture of emotions, to be honest. That's probably the overwhelming one is sort of anxiety and fear and uncertainty, because 6,500-ish people in the trust might listen to this, hopefully. And I don't know how many people are going to be positive about what I've just read, or be negative and blaming and be the sort of the vultures that I was talking about. So it's quite terrifying to put yourself out there. But on the other side, I think, because we're co-chairs of this network, we have to be honest, open out there about how we experience difficulty and about what it's like, because unless we do, any culture is not going to change. So I just think this is a really important thing to do, and I'm willing to take that risk.
Well, thank you, and I mean it's incredibly brave for you to have read that out, and admirably candid. And I think you're absolutely right. As a person as chief psychologist and as a co-chair of the 1 in 4 network, I think that's a really powerful thing to have just done. I think also, when I read that, I just thought it was so powerful and struck a chord so strongly. I think a lot of my own experience, I started to feel that something wasn't right. I went and spoke to a GP, this is a couple of years ago now, and ended up going to Occy Health, who were all fabulous. And then I argued very strongly that I should be okay to stay at work, and did so for the next 3 months, when I must have been an absolute nightmare to work with or for, or have working for. So apologies to all those people. Until eventually I was signed off and referred to a psychiatrist in March 2022. And it took me a couple of weeks to realise that that was absolutely the right thing for me. I felt a whole, as you've described, a whole raft of emotions like guilt and failure and weakness, and why this shouldn't be happening to me. I'm not that sort of person. I've served in the military, I've served on operational tours in Iraq. I led a department of hundreds of people in A&E and acute medicine who were seeing hundreds of patients a day, looking them in the eye, and that wasn't my role. I felt like I had no right to be ill or to struggle. And I think, and maybe as a man as well, as a man in my 40s, that talking about my feelings makes my blood run cold. And I thought that's what I thought when I'd seen occupational health and a GP. Job done. I've talked about it. That's what you're meant to do, right? And so I think I didn't recognise how and what I was, not because of bravado, because I genuinely thought I was okay, when clearly I wasn't. And I think as a leader, I think men and women both experience different pressures for these things. That's not to say one's greater or worse than the other. I think they're just different. I think as a leader, wanting to look strong and wanting to look capable, whilst my team are clearly really, really struggling, I think a lot of people will probably recognise that. And one of the themes that came out of our stands on the campaign week last week was people in leadership positions coming up to us saying, I can see my team are struggling, or they bring me their problems and I don't know what to do about it. And part of the reason we exist is to help those people. And also, we have people coming up to us saying, if you're helping people to learn how to have good conversations, can I send my boss to you? Now, they're half joking, but only half joking. And this is what we mean when we talk about how can we change the culture. What's the next bit, Claire? dialogue, both. So, what if someone comes and talks to you saying that they're struggling, but they don't feel that they can be seen to be struggling? What would you say to that person?
So, just pulling out what you were just talking about, I think it's, and what I was saying as well, it's important so we're going to talk to somebody who has a mental health difficulty and is struggling. It's important to think that you don't have to fix that person, because it's not your role. You can't fix that person necessarily. You can maybe signpost them to occupational health well-being, and what they really need, as I was hopefully making clear, is they probably just want to talk to somebody, and talk to somebody that's kind. I think there's a reason why we all work in the NHS, and I think we all have kindness in us. So being kind, talk to them, take them for a coffee, listen to them. Don't try and fix their problems. Don't try and sort of point out what's going well for them, because it doesn't matter what's going well for them in their life or what appears to be going well for them in their lives. That's not the issue. You can have people who have, amazing looking lives, but they can still suffer from depression and or anxiety and other issues. So I guess that's about, don't judge them, don't try and fix them, just listen to them. And then you said that they're worried about sort of being a bit more open about them struggling. I think it's about getting that balance. I think we need to start being more open about how we're struggling. But there is a reality that some people out there may judge us, may be the vultures that I talked about. But again, like I said, I think we just have to be open and out there to try and help people to understand what this is like. And of course I would support them. And just as you said, going to the GP for a one-off conversation doesn't fix it. So it's not just a one-off conversation maybe with these people if you're managing them. It's about touching base with them so that they know that you're there and they can come to talk to you, and that you are able to listen to them.
Yeah, thank you. And something else I hear quite a lot is people saying, I am really struggling, and I recognise that I'm struggling, but I can't possibly go ill because I'm a mum, I'm a dad, I'm a carer, don't want to let my team down. And I think if you are in that position, looking after yourself is the best way you can help the people that depend on you.
Because you would go off if you had a broken leg.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You wouldn't feel like a failure, and no one's immune. Right? So a chief psychologist isn't immune. A professional psychologist isn't immune. Someone that claims to be, tough and hard and served in the army and led big teams, not immune. It's not. It's not weakness, it's a totally different thing. Strong people can become ill. Right, what would we like people to do now? So we talked about shame and stigma. How do we get around that?
Talking.
What do we do about that? Talking, yeah.
Talking and not judging, criticising people when they talk.
No.
And I think it's automatically that some of us are going to go, what are they talking about? I don't understand. But I think it's important to catch yourself thinking that and just reflect on that and think about, why am I thinking that? Maybe I need to just try and understand a bit more. We were talking about the I had a black dog link.
Oh, yes.
Which is a really good. So if you Google,
if you Google I had a black dog, so there's these books. There's a YouTube video of I had a black dog as well. I'm sure we'll put the link somewhere on this video. It's written in it's pictures and very short. It's written like a comic almost, and it takes about 5 minutes to read.
It's really beautifully. Beautifully was that the wrong word? It does beautifully explain what it's like to experience depression.
And also living with a black dog, which is aimed at people who are living with someone who's struggling with depression. And they are both written and illustrated by Matthew Johnston. If you want to look them up, we'll put links to the YouTube video.
So yes, that's about understanding, reducing the stigma, being out there and open and talking about it and asking for help. I think people find it very difficult to ask for help because of the stigma and shame.
So if I just met Clare in the pub and said, I'm not very healthy, she would quite reasonably assume what I mean is put on a few pounds, get out of breath going upstairs, belt's got a bit too tight. She wouldn't think I was ill. If I met someone in the pub and said, I'm not very mentally healthy, that's a whole different conversation, and I think a lot of people might sort of take a step back and make sure there's no sharp objects in the vicinity. Those two conversations are totally different, and there's absolutely no reason why they need to be. People will go to the gym or go for a run just to look after themselves, not because they're broken and not because they're aspiring Olympic athletes, just to take physical care of ourselves. What do we do to mentally take care of ourselves? And I know, for me, I know what the signs are when I'm mentally speaking, becoming a bit flabby and a bit out of breath. And I also know what to do about it. It's taken me 40 odd years to figure that out, but I now have those tools. Funnily enough for me, they're similar to if my belt gets a bit too tight, get out of breath, go upstairs. So what next? So we're all responsible for modelling what we want our culture to be. Right? We are the culture of the trust, and if we can't interact with our peers on a kind and compassionate way, for one thing, that's not going to help the wider culture of the trust, and for another thing, it's not going to help the care of our patients, which is what we're all here for, what gets us out of bed in the morning. Anything else you want to say on that?
No.
Before we get people to join the network?
Join the network,
right. Okay. So the network meets on Teams. It's 1 o'clock on the first Monday of the month. Get in touch with me or Claire, or there is a email address for the network which I'll put in the comments. And we're also developing a training course, I say we, Claire, which we're calling STEAM, to help people learn to understand what it's like to experience a mental health problem and how to interact with them. It's not an alternative to the REACT course, which helps people to have good conversations. It's a complementary to the REACT course. The two should complement each other. And if you do the course, you can have a 1 in 4 badge, which currently Claire is the only person qualified to wear at the moment, because we haven't run any courses yet. So come and join the network, sign up for the training when we've sent details out about how to do it, and be kind to each other. Anything else?
No, thank you.
Fabulous. Thanks for watching.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Hey, we're getting good at this.
Yeah.